Welcome to the Gender in Focus podcast. I'm Elle, and each week I get to ask Kai Scott, the president of Transfocus Consulting, all the questions you have ever wanted to ask about trans and non-binary people in the workplace and in the wider world.
Trans and non-binary folks are not expecting perfect allyship. Just even saying something like to the person who might be off base in some way, hey, I'm new to this topic, but I have a sense that what you just said or did was off. And I'm learning in this process as much as anyone, and I'd like to learn together with you.
Tuning in to what my values actually are and kind of rethinking like, okay, is this important to me? Yeah, it is. Okay, so I don't actually want to stop this. I just need to take a break.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by the constant backlash? You're not alone. In this episode, Elle and I dive into the emotional weight of allyship burnout, the guilt of not doing enough, the paralysis of not knowing what to say or do, and the fear of doing harm while trying to help. I share some vulnerable stories about burnout in the context of Indigenous reconciliation, and Elle offers a powerful reframe. What if we changed the pace, not the purpose? Tune in for real talk on how to move from fatigue to focus by getting curious, staying grounded in your values, and taking action that's local, intentional, and sustainable. I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Elle. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm also doing well. Yeah, even if a bit tired, but that's okay. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah, it does. It's well, I was going to say it's early morning. It's not too early. Maybe you should go to bed earlier. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Catch up on that sleep.
So you touched on just in your intro then about this constant backlash that we're seeing at the moment. And I think it is probably pretty natural for people to feel that kind of burnout or that fatigue. And so I wanted to start, I guess, with what you're seeing from allies around you and like what that actually looks like in terms of burnout.
Yeah. No kidding. Burnout looks like a few different ways. Certainly, there's a lot of changes happening, whether down in the United States or even here, where legislation's being proposed or passed that is harmful to trans and non-binary folks, whether related to washrooms or access to gender affirming care for youth, school policies, sports, long
Right.
list of things. And it's just coming so fast, right? So fast and furious. This state or this province has done something. Leaders are talking about things. There's opinion pieces that kind of flare up and become viral. Any number of things can happen on one day. And when it comes so fast, it's hard to know where to go with that information. Where do I apply my limited energy, time, resources as an ally? Is it this area? Is it this other area? And you look at how big things are and are trying to assess, or at least myself as an ally, I'm trying to constantly assess like, where's my energy most effective? What do I actually have control over? And it can feel a bit despondent that it's so much and so unfair and so ugly. It's really ugly sometimes, some of the things that are said or done. And it can be debilitating, where it's just like, does my action or that of a small group really make a difference in the large scale awfulness? So there's that. There's of confusion, like, what should I actually do as an ally? Not wanting to kind of step on the toes of trans and non-binary folks. And so it's just very disorienting, very fast paced confusion and wondering what to do. And so people can just get to a state of not doing anything and maybe even curling up in bed. Sometimes I do that, just like totally overwhelmed, put the blankets over my head and hope for a better day tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. I can appreciate that. How do you validate that, the reality of all of that stress and burnout and sort of despair a lot of the time? I definitely get like a sense of just like, not too often. I'm pretty good at getting myself out of it, but occasionally I will fall into this despair when something bad happens or some news comes out of my own country or the States or something like that. How do you validate that and acknowledge that without getting stuck there?
That's a really
or
good
best advice? I
right.
appreciate you're not a therapist.
Right, exactly. That's true. Therapy is good. Could start with that. You know, it is important to validate it because it is awful and
Mm,
tragic and horrific in some cases what is being actively worked against for trans and non-binary folks, especially given the small size of the population
mhm.
that we are. It's
Right.
just like it's totally disproportionate to our scale, and somehow we're the boogeyman in some people's minds. And I think it is important to grieve that,
Mhm,
especially if somebody is a part of the trans and non-binary community or even loved ones of trans and non-binary. To witness this kind of vitriol is really disempowering because
mhm,
we're looking on the sidelines and just seeing how our family members are being pummeled, and you can't help but not be mad, despairing, and acknowledging the awfulness. Now, that
mhm,
said, if we stay there, unfortunately, it takes all of our power and saps
mhm,
us completely dry of any ability to be a part of the positive history that's being developed. Because there is a positive side to this, right? There's awfulness, and then there's the continued steps towards making a more inclusive, expansive future. It hasn't stopped entirely. It continues to unfold. And the not staying is difficult because it is really easy to pay attention to negative. I mean, we're kind of
mhm.
almost evolutionarily focused or oriented
Yeah.
towards the negative. We want to be able to scan for danger and be able to respond. But we do have to kind of work with our minds to be like, okay, that's enough news for today. If we've gone, 1 or 2
Right.
hours into the rabbit hole, maybe pulling out of it, reorienting to, life, whether it's connected to community, family, friends, nature. We've talked a lot about nature being a very powerful tool. Well, not tool because it's living, it's a being. And so
Mhm,
being in that, connecting with it can really kind of disrupt that despair and reorient us to what is possible, what is needed, and where we can place ourselves. And sometimes it helps to talk to people about that despair to an extent. And, I was mentioning therapy. I highly recommend it. Obviously, there's a financial accessibility, but yeah,
sure.
talking to somebody who can, validate those feelings and come up with strategies that work for the individual. Also, I think the fastest way I've found out of despair is to actually contribute, whether it's volunteering
Mhm,
or connecting and being with community and giving in some practical way. It just being busy with the body somehow helps dislodge,
mhm.
and you can see the appreciation in people's faces and that it's made a material difference to them by having contributed. So those are just a few things that come to mind. Yeah, any that you know of or that work well for you?
Just setting limits and boundaries around my time and what I pour my energy into is the big one for me. I think I've talked to you about this, but I generally don't look at the news
Yeah.
related to trans and non-binary stuff until the weekend. Like I'll give myself most of the week to
Mhm.
live in my bubble of ignorance and then I'll catch up on the weekend. Just to like that's not something I always do, but at the moment that's what I'm doing. I'm like catching up. Like I'm still informed, but
Mm.
I'm not letting it swallow me up.
Yeah.
So no, for me, it's been just setting boundaries. And also, I think what you said about contributing in some way really
Mm.
is a really good one. And I more on that later because I have some questions for you
Mm.
about that. But I want to ask you first though about a lot of people get this sense of dread that they're not doing enough
Mm.
and then end up just not doing anything. And so could you go into that side a bit more and just sort of that anxiety induced fatigue?
Yeah. So, this fear of not doing enough.
Mm,
Is when I reflect on it, and I've certainly had those feelings or
for sure.
thoughts many a time on other equity groups, right? Like,
Mhm.
I rattle off 50 things that I could be doing, right? And usually it's
Right.
because I've rattled off those 50 things that it feels like I've not doing enough
Right.
because I'm maybe only
Sure.
doing one or maybe none, right? And so I'm kind of pummeling myself mentally, and it really is just me at war with myself because obviously people in those equity groups are not at my door being like, hey, where
Mm.
have you been? Why haven't you done X, Y, and Z? And
Right.
it's more just like, rather, because it's all mental energy. And for me, it's about conserving energy at this stage of things.
Mhm.
And as much as I can notice, as soon as I am doing self pummeling, to be like, that's not very productive. And I'm just like wasting away energy that
Mhm.
could be applied to doing at least one thing, right? And
Mhm.
really, it's about building momentum towards something. I find too, if I'm have the feeling I'm not doing enough, I'm usually hesitant about something as well, like not sure
Mm.
where to begin or what to do. And so
Right.
it feels easier to get stuck in the I'm not doing enough, because then at least I'm showing that I'm guilty, and that should count for something, kind of. It's a very kind of interesting psychology, I will say.
Right.
But of course, that doesn't really count for anything. That is really helpful. And so
Mhm.
it's more to get grounded in a kind of matter of fact way, to be like, okay, that's wasting energy. Let's hit a pause button on that. And
Mm.
what is it that I'm good at? What is
Mm.
it that I feel drawn towards? What am I passionate about? And it's okay to be oriented towards oneself in the wanting to reach to help others or to be involved. And so once I have a little bit more clarity on that, it's easier to connect. Then I
Mhm.
can be like, hey, this is what I can do. I can offer. I'm good at grant writing. I'm good at buying groceries and bringing them to somebody. I don't know what the thing is, or I quilt,
Mhm.
right? Or I make beautiful art. Just there's everybody has their own unique thing, and so that makes it that much easier to connect with the needs of other organizations and offer something. They might redirect or say, we don't actually need that. We need something else, in which case you can, figure it out from there. But just even that is more productive to try to find a way forward. And I would also say less focus on quantity. I think that's a very Western way to approach things.
For
Like,
sure.
I should do 5 things. It's like, why? Why five?
Mm.
Or whatever the number is. It's like, what if
Mhm.
it was one thing that was like super meaningful and maybe not even that much time? It just was meant that
Mhm.
much. For me, that seems like a better way to focus, and rather than just on the numbers. And then it can be that much more powerful. So yeah, those are a few things that come to mind to kind of unravel the I'm not doing enough, or I don't know what to do or where to
Mhm.
begin. It's like, no, you probably already have a few of the answers, just maybe being quieter and self-reflective, thinking about what it is and then offering that. And maybe not all groups either. I think sometimes we think we got to help everyone, it's like that's probably not realistic. Maybe for
Mhm.
some superhuman person, but certainly not for me. So,
No.
pick one thing, one group, and focus on that. And I find once I start to help one group, it kind of naturally flows into other
Mhm.
things. And so you just kind of step
For
by
sure.
step figure some pathway into other things. And it doesn't have to be such a struggle or a grind.
I really, really love the way you worded something just then,
Yeah.
which was about not what I should be doing, but what can I do? And that allyship doesn't look one way. There
Mhm.
isn't one way to be a good ally. Often feel like when I talk to people in other equity groups, when they're talking about allies, it tends to be that people think they need to take this big role
Mm-hmm.
and they need to be the sort of almost like the leader of it, and they need to be doing all this big stuff, and actually it's the small stuff
Ah,
that makes up the everyday allyship. It's the small stuff that is the most important.
it is. And you're right about the little things making a huge difference. So just even committing to, I mean, we go back to pronouns a lot, but, and it's not the only thing, but certainly if
Sure.
you commit to somebody's pronouns and be like, I'm going to
Hmm.
practice them and really get dialed on them, and maybe even work with others so that they can be dialed as well, and take off some of that heavy lift for that person. Like, that's really beautiful, and people will really,
Hmm.
that person will really notice it. It doesn't have to be this big thing. I would even say that that's I mean, we don't need to do comparative analysis here, but that could be actually a tremendous experience for somebody.
When it comes to those sort of smaller moments of allyship, and a lot of people feeling like there's a responsibility to do all the big things
Mm.
and show up in a really huge way, could you go into recognizing when it's time for you to step up and address certain issues, and sort of comparing that to when you should maybe step back
Mm.
and recognize when you might be centering yourself?
Oh yeah. Step up versus step aside. I mean, these types of things are really important. And it does require some situational awareness that perhaps is underdeveloped, especially in Western society. We are very kind of action oriented and, rush in vibes,
Mm.
which I think comes from a degree of anxiety, the I
Hmm.
want to do something. And so like, do something, and then kind of
Hmm.
rush it rather than just a pause for a beat to look at the situation, observe people's facial expressions. And, we don't always want to be just doing it based on how somebody appears. Sometimes a direct ask is also appropriate, but there's a lot of
Hmm.
information that's being disseminated from people. I tend to look at people's level of exhaustion and whether
Hmm.
they're saying something as the trans or non-binary person in a situation. And if they're quiet and perhaps their eyes are cast down or their heavy sigh, there's certain clues that people are
Hmm.
sharing. And if they're looking at you, as somebody they trust, and kind of like sometimes people give the like help eyeballs,
Yeah.
help look, quiet desperation.
Sure.
Those can be really powerful clues that that there's a moment for you to step in to that situation.
Hmm.
And it's not a matter of like taking over the situation or scenario, but more about, hey, this might not be on your radar, but here's kind of what I see happening at this moment. And here's some suggestions for how to rectify it. And not to say that those are the only ways, but just say, hey, want to get the ball rolling here, open to
Mm.
your thoughts as well. So you kind of broker that restorative, kind of restoration for that individual. And, after something has been addressed or at least pointed out, I think it is valuable to go back to that individual, the trans or non-binary person, after the fact to kind of debrief it. Obviously, if they want to, if they're done for the day, don't push it. But just to say, hey, this is how I thought of doing it in the moment. I just want to make sure that how that felt for you, right? And an open
Mhm.
question to see, did this land for them? Were they wanting to step in but didn't have an opportunity? So that can be a good
Mhm.
way to learn. So sometimes you learn by doing and getting feedback and then adjusting accordingly the next time, right?
Mhm.
Now, if you see a trans or non-binary person stepping in to the situation themselves and starting to talk and addressing it themselves, it's okay to stay there and hold space for that, to be a part of it. But it's really important not to be like, yeah, what they said, and or like, no, actually not that, like disagreeing with it. That's not, I don't think most people would do that. But
Mhm.
sometimes people feel they want to add their 2 cents into something, which might
Mhm.
complicate that trans and non-binary person's response. So that's when you have a step aside moment where you're there in support of, and there might be opportunity to speak to the person that was being corrected or addressed after the fact to see how that landed for them, to do maybe a little
Mhm.
extra work. So that might be like a step aside for a moment while the trans and non-binary person talks, but then loop back to do additional allyship work with that person.
Mhm. I think often some people can feel, and I definitely have done this,
Yeah.
of feeling like because I don't know what to do and I'm a bit overwhelmed, I'm just going to leave that to someone else to
Uh,
do.
yeah. Yeah.
And can I ask you to speak on the consequences of that and just
Mm.
allowing other people to do this, to
Right.
do the allyship work?
So, if there's not the trans person around, it's more obvious, right? That
Mm.
you're it. And,
Yeah.
or even if the trans person is giving you the like, please help
Hmm.
glance, if they're in the situation and you don't step up, that
Mhm.
can be really harmful. And even if it's not intended, because so often trans and non-binary folks we have to do our own work
Mhm.
time and time again. It's very exhausting to the point where some people it's too much and they socially isolate. They're like a tap out
Mhm.
of social interactions. So enough of those instances of, allies not stepping up, then it can result in decisions that people make that have lasting impacts on their lives, and like
Mhm.
not feeling like people have their back or just having to go it alone. And yeah, there's so many different ways that just it's not even, I mean, betrayal might be a too strong of a word, but there is a sense of that. And it's not even that the ally is being malicious in that moment, just
Mhm.
unsure of themselves. And the thing is, I want to communicate is that trans and non binary folks are not expecting perfect allyship.
Mhm.
Just even saying something like to the person who might be off base in some way, hey, I'm new to this topic, but I have a sense that what you just said or did was off.
Mhm.
And I'm learning in this process as much as anyone. And I'd like to learn together with you on this. So there's even that kind of admission that don't have it all figured out, but that you want to help
Mhm.
this other person can make a huge difference. And then that's taking off that heavy load from the trans or non binary person.
You told me a story once, and I was wondering if it would be okay for you to share here. And obviously, if it isn't, then no pressure.
Yeah.
But you talked about your own role as an ally
Mm.
for Indigenous people, and I was hoping you could go into that a little bit and how you've experienced allyship burnout.
Yeah, in terms of my own allyship journey with Indigenous people, spanned several decades now. And, I've had varying degrees of anxiety around that allyship, especially at the beginning. I felt very awkward saying land acknowledgements. This is many
Mm.
decades ago. And knowing enough about Indigenous groups to be able to navigate, say, cultural events, and just feeling very unsure of myself, whether I should be in a space, should I go on reserve, just like all of those
Mm.
anxieties
Yeah.
that a lot of non-Indigenous folks have, and what to say, not to say, all that kind of stuff. And so through a series of listening and just continuing to show up at events and wherever invited, it really just taught me to jump in. And it's not to say that I didn't do any harm. Obviously, I'm sure
Mhm.
I know I had a lot of missteps along the way, but by the continuous showing up, I got better and better at knowing what it was expected of me, reading the room of, when I was needed, when I wasn't, and really being able to show up. And it really clicked for me. There's one particular story that really sealed it for me. And this is maybe 12 years ago, where I was working with an Indigenous elder. I used to work in the mining industry, look for proposed mines, and that got me out on the land with elders talking about different areas that they used for hunting, trapping, berry picking, plant gathering, etc. And this one particular elder was showing me how to harvest licorice root, and it was just so beautiful, so fascinating, and so touching. This very methodical offering tobacco before harvesting, and identifying the plant properly, communicating with it, and then how to harvest it properly. And so I was like, oh, this is great. I'm documenting it furiously as part of my role. And I was kind of a bit clueless because I was so anxious. I wanted to do the proper documentation that I lost the plot on, this is an oral tradition. It's relational. You share information based on an established relationship. And then there's responsibilities that come from that. And I was missing that responsibility because I was so focused on my task, which is very Western, right? Write everything down, you know, transfer it to others, etc. And he just paused, and it was very gentle, but very clear. He's like, I am relying on you to gather licorice root for the Sundance now. And I was like, whoa, holy crap. It just really like woke me up in that moment to the much larger picture at play. And then I took it very seriously. And after hours, I then went about and gathered all this licorice root and then brought it to him the next day. And he was a little surprised, I think. He was a little taken, like, I think, I mean, I'm sure he puts out many requests and perhaps doesn't get as many responses.
Hmm.
But when I, gave that full bag of licorice root, uh, it really meant a lot. It was a really touching moment for both of us, both as him having clarified and for me to respond. And so I think there's hopefully like a beautiful lesson, like not to be consumed by that anxiety, but to be open to the bigger picture and be
Hmm.
aware of that and responsive to it. So if somebody makes a request, there's a degree of trust that is being put into you as the person receiving that request, and to the best of your ability, go and try to do that. That builds that relationship over time, and more will be revealed from there. But that's a very important starting point.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. That's super powerful.
I
Oh my
remembered it. I
gosh,
haven't told that in a while. Oh, he was so sweet. Mike, the
that's
elder.
sweet.
Yeah.
Do you think that curiosity plays a part in keeping the momentum going
Mm.
and like avoiding that burnout?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good one. I like that because curiosity has a lightness to it. And there's a bit
Hmm.
of humility that as allies, we don't know everything. And we're maybe in a more observant mindset and then see things that we're like, I wonder what that's about. And then inquire, obviously, with humility to say, if it's okay for me to know, or if you want to share, I'm curious about this aspect that I just noticed here. And people appreciate, for the most part, that noticing. It means that you're kind of attuned to what's happening more generally, and also wanting to contribute and just finding those different pathways in. And
Hmm.
maybe there will be something there to do or to know, in which case it'll be highlighted by the curiosity. And then if not, you just go about your merry way, right? So there's kind of not a way to lose with curiosity, obviously with humility. But yeah, and it can help because it redirects the mind that wants to go to the negative towards the more
Hmm.
positive, more kind of action or solutions oriented, or at least knowledge oriented direction. And it's this very powerful mechanism to help with what could otherwise be just staying in the despair, when actually there's so much that needs to be done or that can be contributed to or that's being created in a positive direction. It's just a matter of figuring out how to hook up with that. And curiosity can be a bit of that bridge towards that side of things.
Hmm. And before I guess we go, well, I want to know some top tips. You've shared a lot here, but like if you were to say your top one that you use to avoid burnout and anything else you want to close off on, now
Yeah.
is your time to share your
Oh,
wisdom.
wow, wow. How do I
No
avoid?
pressure.
No, none. Um, yeah, I mean, I have a few different tools, but the one that I find helps the most is pause. And of course, there's different
Mm.
ways to pause because, my mind can go in many different directions. And if I notice that it's perhaps going in a squirrelier or darker direction, pausing, I mean, first I have to notice it, but then second, pause,
Right.
and just to know that I have different options available to me. And then the pause allows me to figure out, what do I want to do next? Where do I want to go? And certainly, I have a meditation practice that allows me that ability to work with my mind in this way of like observing and pausing. Um,
Hmm.
that certainly helps. Of course, everyone has their own tool. May not be meditation. Um, and then the second best one that's kind of related to pause is for me to go take a walk. Like, it's the
Hmm.
simplest thing, right? Just a change of pace, surroundings that allow me to then reset to when I come back. I have a different headspace that I can go somewhere else with it other than where I was going. How about
Fair.
you?
For me, well, I also have a meditation practice
Mm,
that I do that helps me stop when I'm spiraling and just take a minute,
yeah,
take a breath
yeah.
to establish actually where I am. I think rather than something that I used to do would be to just push through
Mm,
the burnout and make it worse and actually make me completely useless.
mm,
And so avoiding that really for me has looked like just rather than continuously just keeping going, I will change the pace a
Mm.
bit. So
Mm.
if I'm feeling like I'm not able to keep going with the momentum that I've got, just
Sure.
being able to recognize that kind of before it happens, like I can just feel myself slowing down a bit, and using that as a permission to be like, okay, I can't be at 100% all the time.
Yeah.
So actually my 100% this week looks like my usual 20%, and just taking things right down,
Mm.
and giving myself permission to take a
Mm.
break, knowing that it's necessary in order to keep going with it, was
Yeah.
much more helpful to be consistent with my allyship, and just allowing myself to have those waves of energy. And also something that I find really helpful is, like, especially when I'm in those where I just really can't be bothered anymore. That
Mm.
I've definitely done that a couple of times, where I just can't be bothered to keep going with something. And it's tuning in to what my values actually are,
Mm.
and kind of rethinking, like, okay, is this important to me? Yeah, it is. Okay, so I don't actually want to stop this. I just
Mhm.
need to take a break. I just need to have a breather, and then I can get back to it. So those are the things, just tuning into what my morals are, what my values are, whether I want to have integrity or whether I don't care. And I usually do care.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
usually the answer is slowing down or taking a break, rather than just giving up entirely.
Yeah. 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 That's such a good reminder. The values can be the North Star that,
Mm.
keep us plugging away at different paces. Like, you're so true about you're not doing a sprint for the whole marathon.
Mhm.
Just sometimes you'll have to slow down to be able to continue. So, yeah, I love that. There's life beyond burnout with a few of these strategies and others. On social media, we can share more. I'm sure there are other really great strategies out there. I'm curious to hear about them.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kai. And I'll see you next week.
Okay, bye for now.